Good day, I'm Fouché from the University of Pretoria, and I'm going to present on behalf of myself and Professor Polo Garrido from the Polytechnic University of Valencia on the corporate reporting of cooperatives from an international perspective. Expectations of the United Nations for cooperative enterprises to become a leader in the social and environmental sustainability are high. It is, however, questionable whether they will be able to live up to these expectations, as a significant need of evidence-based approaches still exist to demonstrate the contribution of cooperatives to sustainability. In the light of limited evidence in the form of formal reporting on the accomplishment of the social responsibility of cooperatives, academia is urged to assist cooperatives in the development of CSR practices. As a first step in the direction of developing such practices, the CSR practices, or rather the corporate reporting in general practices, are explored in this paper. This paper can at this stage also be considered as work in progress. The global revolution on the corporate reporting practices of organizations experienced over the past 2 decades could be prescribed to the potential of information beyond traditional financial reporting to bridge information asymmetry, holding organizations accountable to all stakeholders. Scholars have, in response to this, performed extensive research on the determinants, the level of adoption and benefits of financial reporting, integrated reporting, management reporting, environmental and social reporting, as well as governance reporting. A research gap, however, still exists, because existing research is mainly focused from an investor-owned firm perspective. Moreover, our existing reporting frameworks also focused on the reporting requirements of investor-owned firms. This is quite ironic, as it was found that the attitude and commitment of stakeholders towards organizations could significantly be influenced by the content and transparency of corporate reporting. In the case of cooperatives, members can only make informed decisions using a mix and having access to a mix of financial and non-financial information. Moreover, the survival of cooperatives depends on membership and the willingness of members to economically participate. From the perspective of the orientation of the country towards stakeholders, it was found that organizations domiciled in stakeholder-oriented countries are more likely to issue CSR reports due to the performance being more likely to have an effect on the financial performance of organizations in such countries. Stakeholder pressure could, on the other hand, be a motivation behind organizations legitimizing themselves, leading to the disclosure of information or environmental information in a way that is rather an attempt to control the environmental agenda and conversation, rather than improving on their behavior. From the perspective of capital, shareholders and investors recently emphasized the importance of social and environmental reporting on their decision-making. The actions and operations of organizations with social and environmental effects could, after all, have a significant effect on the future profitability and therefore share value of the organization. It was found that organizations in more environmentally sensitive sectors are also more likely to issue social and environmental reports. And some sectors are even more likely to justify themselves by issuing social and environmental reports. The objectives of this study, bridging the research gap as identified, is to obtain an understanding of the CR practices of cooperatives. H1. Cooperatives domiciled in stakeholder-oriented countries are more likely to adopt CR practices as opposed to shareholder-oriented countries. Co-ops in more sensitive sectors are more likely to adopt CSR as opposed to less sensitive sectors. Co-ops in a financial sector are more likely to adopt CR than co-ops in a non-financial sector. Co-ops with public listed entity, or public listed equity rather, are more likely to adopt CSR as opposed to co-ops without public listed equity. And lastly, co-ops issuing equity to non-members are also more likely to adopt CR as opposed to co-ops not issuing equity to non-members. The target population in this study is the global largest 150 co-ops, according to the top 300 co-ops and mutual list as identified by the World Cooperative Monitor. Some organizations could, due to language requirements and availability of information, not have been studied. The researchers in this study do recognize that a conclusion on the status of CR reporting of cooperatives in general could not be made due to the extensive nature of the organizations included. In obtaining an understanding of the CR practices of organizations, a content analysis was performed on all reports published by the organizations in this study by referring to the nature of the reports, frameworks applied, and level of assurance obtained. The latter was documented to a codebook, and the level of adoption was measured by means of an index. The formula of CR is therefore the total of the various reports, AR, FR, IR, ER, GR, MR, and OS. Followed by this, an independent sample t-test was conducted to test if the level of adoption of CR and the various components of CR differ, depending on the type of country, sensitivity of sector, financial sectors, equity, capital, and public listed equity. This is just an overview of the types of reports, frameworks, as well as level of assurance. In other words, external auditors confirming that the adherence to the relevant framework. We can see that almost 80% of organizations published annual reports, but most of them did not use a framework. Financial reports in this study were only considered if a framework was applied and if the financial statements were audited. More than 70% of organizations published according to this criteria. Approximately half of organizations adopted environmental, social, governance, and management reporting. Compliance with frameworks and audit assurance occurred in the minority of cases. The vast minority of organizations, however, adopted integrated reporting. The level of adoption was measured by awarding 0 in the case of no report, 1 in a case of a report without a framework, 2 in the case of a report issued with a framework, and 3 a report issued with a framework also subject to assurance. Annual financial statements are, however, only considered if an audit report could be verified. Any other formal report published was awarded 1 point for the CR reporting calculation. An independent sample t-test was conducted to test if the level of adoption of CR differ for each variable. The results indicated that the type of country, external listed equity, capital, have a significant effect on the adoption of CR reporting. On a 1% level of significance, it was found that co-ops in stakeholder-oriented countries had a higher level of adoption of CR. than shareholder-orientated countries, and co-ops with public listed equity and external equity had a higher level of adoption than 10 entities with no public listed equity or external equity. The significant determinants to CR have by means of linear regression model been identified. The standard beta coefficient was used to illustrate the relative strength of the explanatory variables in the model. The type of country was identified as the strongest determinant, followed by the organizations with external equity capital. In order to determine the determinants of the variables of corporate reporting comprises, the determinants of adoption were analyzed using binary regression analysis. The only significant predictors to other reporting populated that a cooperative in a non-financial sector is 0.15 times likely to issue any other standalone report as an organization rendering financial services. The type of country was the only significant predictor to environmental and social reporting. An organization in a stakeholder-oriented country is 12 times more likely to issue an environmental and social report also complying with the framework, as opposed to an organization in a stakeholder-oriented country. The type of country and issuing external equity capital populated significant determinants for governance reporting, as an organization in a stakeholder-oriented country is 5 times more likely to adopt governance reporting, and an organization with external equity is 3 times more likely to adopt governance reporting. This study creates an awareness with policymakers and regulators that limited CR reporting still exists, addressing the reporting needs of cooperatives. Those charged with governance at cooperatives who have not adopted CR reporting are being made aware that cooperatives are managing, or some cooperatives are actually managing to apply CR reporting. Members of cooperatives are being made aware that it's not impossible for co-ops to adopt CR reporting, and that even more pressure could be put on cooperatives to adopt CR reporting. We recommend that the effect of adoption of CR on the financial performance and profitability of cooperatives and on the needs of members being addressed should be addressed in future research. We thank you for your time.